The key fundamentals of high performance don't change whether you're a athlete, a coach, a business person, a CEO, a mother, a father, a school teacher, a musician. They are exactly the same. It's just contextualized. One of the big things that we do in sport is that we actually, when we're working with high performance athletes, we actually design everything around recovery, because recovery is when you get faster. It's where you get stronger. It's where the mindset starts to develop. You actually gain greater memory, your cognitive ability grows, etc., when you are resting and recovering.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Finding Equilibrium show. I'm delighted to be here, delighted you're here, and delighted to have my guest. And my guest today is Craig Johns. Craig is the CEO and managing partner for Speakers Institute Corporate. He's a high performance leadership coach, elite athlete. I mean, lots of things. It feels that you've lived 9 lives, to be honest, when I read your bio. So welcome, Craig. How are you today?
Thanks very much, Lawrence. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's been an enjoyable life so far, and hopefully I can continue to do lots more fun and exciting things I've done so far.
I'm sure. So where are you today? Where are you speaking to us from?
Yeah, so I'm based in Canberra, Australia, in my home office, and so enjoying being here. For me, it doesn't matter where I am in the world to work at the moment. Our team are based across 5 countries at present, and that will increase to 7 shortly. And no one else actually lives in Canberra right now. So we're a very remote company, which is quite fun.
That's wonderful. It's good that we can all now live in one place and work with so many people around the world. So let's get into a little bit more about you. So CEO, high performance coach, elite athlete. Lots of different chapters in your life. So how did it start? Like, how did you move from? How did you become a high performance coach?
Yeah, very good. I grew up in New Zealand on a small farm in a place called Taranaki, which is a province in New Zealand. And like many of the people that live in that area, it's a lot of farms. So our next door neighbors were maybe a mile away. You had a lot of time to think for yourself. I played a lot of sport. I was into anything and everything I could possibly do. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was like, how much sport did you do as a kid? And I said, well, probably from the ages of 8 years on, I would have probably averaged between 2 and 3 hours a day up until I was a teenager. And then it would have been quite easily 3 to 4 hours a day. It was just something we did, and probably no wonder my career got cut short as an athlete, because my body had shut down by the age of 30. I loved every sort of sport I could do. And what's quite fascinating is I was able to excel in endurance sports as an individual in swimming and triathlon, but also in team sports and field hockey. And I was very, very fortunate in kind of those team sports with, especially field hockey, where I was able to make New Zealand squads like triathlon. But my dad's family all came from hockey and coaches, and my mum's side all come from cricket, and all of them became coaches as well. So I was kind of embedded in that space. But with hockey, I was very fortunate to be part of a team that still holds a very special record in New Zealand, where they went over 270 games straight without losing. Wow. And so you can imagine that there were some people that went the whole span of 16 years in a very, very special team from a small town of 5,000 people that were able to figure out how to win. And, sometimes we drew, but we never lost for that amount of time. So quite special to be in that team environment where, you've got a 50% chance of winning most of the time. But we won 100% of the time with that one team for 5 years for me. And I was right at the beginning of it. Whereas you go to endurance sports, especially like triathlon, where, I've stood on start lines with 2,500 people and only one person can win. The odds of winning an endurance sport like triathlon is so slim. I've been in other events where there's up to 6,000-7,000 people. And so it's very different mindsets. And so I think that really helped me as I've sort of gone through my athletic career and been around the world to then shift into coaching. We're now working with teams and even more now when I'm in organizations where I've got that ability to be really focused and dedicated as an individual, but also really understand the power of the team and how you can leverage other people's strengths to help yours as well. So that was pretty fascinating from a sporting point of view. Coaching wise, I've always, I don't know, just naturally fallen into coaching. I think the first stint of coaching someone gave me when I was 12 years old, and they said, okay, we want you to, and I was in the primary representative team, and they said, okay, we want you to coach the B team for a few sessions. And so, you know, there was obviously coaches who recognized something there at that time and began paid coaching from the age of 15 right through to coaching international teams at Olympic training centers in places like Taiwan. And along that way, did a lot of sports science as well. So I kept myself pretty busy.
It's interesting hearing you speak, because you realize how that career in sports has provided such a strong foundation when it comes to business and working with teams of any description. So it's a fundamental part of your training. But I know something happened that brought your sports career to quite an abrupt end, and I'd love you to share that with the audience, because it's quite a dramatic event. And I know if people have heard you speak, they'll be aware of it, but a lot of people won't be familiar with that story.
Yeah, so I actually got told to give up sport 3 times, and the first time I was 16 when I first really started. I first had my first bout of heart problems, and they couldn't identify what was happening. So I was having things like atrial fibrillation, vasovagal syncope. I would lose consciousness for up to 5 minutes at a time. My heart would stop, it would flatline, and no one could figure out actually what was causing it. Especially things like atrial fibrillation are not common with kids. They're normally people who are older, maybe not so fit, etc. But I was getting that at that age. So that was the first time they asked me to give up. The second time was when I was 21, and I started fainting 2 to 3 times a day for a whole month. And so by the end of that first week, I had to give up swim teaching. I was in my final, I was actually just ready to do my final exams of my bachelor's, and I had to stop driving and everything. I was in the learn to swim pool, actually holding a 18-month-old kid. I had one beside me, and I felt myself go, and I rolled out and put the kid down and rolled out, and I had to stop everything after that. And pretty, in some ways, a little bit scary, but for me, it was like I had always mended before. I'd broken arm. Okay, you get back up and you go and compete. I had that first bout of heart problems, and they told me to give up, and I made 2 New Zealand teams for different sports within a year. So for me, it was just kind of like, oh, yep, I'll bounce back up. But when you're sitting in the red zone of emergency and you've got people there that are having, that are dying right next to you, and then they say, okay, no, we need to keep you another night. You're kind of like, oh, maybe there's something wrong. And at that point, I decided to kind of give sport away for a couple of years and just focus on that coaching, sports science, and working with teams. And then came back, went into sport, and won 10 national titles overseas in 4 different sports afterwards. So there's something in there that goes, all right, throw me a hurdle, I'll show you how to get over it, no matter how big it is. And I transitioned out of being an athlete and sport coach into leadership roles and running companies and things like that. And what I found is because in sport, you have really strong triggers when you get recovery wrong, right? So you can't run as fast. Your reactions are slower. You might miss a ball if you're playing field hockey or tennis, or the timing is out. And so you can really feel that trigger when recovery is not there. But in leadership roles, it's a psychological fatigue that goes on, unless there's kind of a catastrophic event. So you're in a space where with psychological fatigue or mental fatigue, it's really gradual, and you don't, and each time it kind of fatigues a little bit, your body adapts to it because it is quite slow. So you don't recognize what's happening. So it keeps what keeps happening is it gradually goes down, down, down. Your body's adapting. You still feel okay. And you're like, okay, I'm not sick. I keep going. And then bang, something happens, right? So for most of you out there, you've probably found that when you go away on holiday, you get sick, right? Because your body goes, finally, you're giving me some recovery. You're actually resting. You need more of this. So you get sick and you start to come out of it, and then it kind of throws you another curveball and says, hey, you know what? No, you're not quite ready to go back to working full on yet. I'm going to hold you down a bit longer. You're going to stay sick a bit longer so you learn a lesson. And obviously most people don't, because they go back and repeat the same things. But what I was doing is working 70 to 80 hours a week for 302 days straight. And it wasn't just your basic work. I was running, we had inside the company, we had 10 different companies under one umbrella. So every conversation, every thought, every meeting an email was completely different. So your brain just never slowed down. And a week before the big event that happened, one of my friends who's working there was actually, he was CEO and I was second in charge. And he walked up to me one day and he said, you know what? He said, Craig, I can't understand why you don't apply what you did so well as an athlete and as a coach. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, look, when you're an athlete, you knew how to perform. And so you would take the rest and recovery so you could perform. You would lead athletes, you would coach them, but you've become so focused on doing more and trying to do everything that it's actually not working. And a week later, I found myself, I fainted. I was out for 5 minutes. My wife kind of really scared because she'd never seen me in that state before. And I got rushed off to hospital and was flatlining. And, it was a big wake up call for me, because that was the first time that I kind of felt I'm not quite invincible. And I could really see the effects on not only my wife, but on our 500 staff as well, and even our clients. And to see that was my wake up call to go, hey, you know what? I've got to change. And that's where break the CEO code, which I talk about, and looking at applying the principles from sport into the way we live people as normal people and as business people came to fruition.
Wow. Some stories. That's interesting. So, and I know embedded, if I unpick that a little bit, but embedded in a lot of what you say is the need to recover. So in sports, we know that physically we have to recover. And I remember in the conversations we've had in the past, you've highlighted that there is a calculation of how you can work out how much recovery is required. And, I think burnout is the big problem we're all facing. And any tools that you can share with people to help them prevent burnout and to recover mentally and emotionally. A lot of our work these days is with our minds rather than with our bodies. And so, if you could elaborate a little bit on the break the CEO code, because that sounds like a code that many of us would like to break.
Yeah. Okay. So really, really good. So a couple of things first. You talked early on about sport and how that kind of goes into business as well. The key fundamentals of high performance don't change whether you're a athlete, a coach, a business person, a CEO, a mother, a father, a school teacher, a musician. They are exactly the same. It's just contextualized. One of the big things that we do in sport is that we actually, when we're working with high performance athletes, we actually design everything around recovery, because recovery is when you get faster. It's where you get stronger. It's where you the mindset starts to develop. And it's about a week delay, especially if it's speed, right? If it's pure speed, it's a week delay. And it's the same thing from as I said, around a mind perspective. You actually gain greater memory, your cognitive ability grows, etc., when you are resting and recovering. So yes, you've got to do some work. You've got to challenge the brain to adapt and evolve, but the adaptation occurs when you slow the brain down and you sleep at nights, or you put in recovery strategies during the day. So that's the shift we need to see in more in the corporate world, or people that are working in that space. the hard thing is, as I mentioned before, like the physical fatigue, you can feel it. So if you get it wrong, it's easy. Whereas the mental fatigue, it's so damn difficult. So you actually have to be very proactive in the way you schedule things like recovery and plan recovery and even performance when it comes in the leadership world, because it is a mental thing. Now, we have a thing called periodization, which initially came from cataloging books. Back in the 1900s, they would catalog things into different periods. Now, the sporting world took that and did athlete periodization around the 1950s, 60s. It started to become a bit popular, where you periodize periods of kind of workload, so kind of workload and stress, where you'd build up the time you would spend training or the amount of weights you put on. And then you would have a deloading phase where you'd have a rest or recovery period that would then allow you to adapt and grow and get faster and stronger and perform better. And in general, it's around a 3-to-1 work to recovery phase. All right. So you build up 3 weeks and then recover for a week. And so, if your training is more intense, so you put more workload in, then the recovery needs to be longer. So it might be a 1-to-1 if you're doing lots of high intensity, big workload. And the same thing happens in corporate life. So if you look at research around how our brain can function and productivity and performance, we can only really stay at a high level of cognitive function for about 45 minutes to an hour before it starts to decline. Yes, you can still perform and you can still function and be productive, but it starts to decline your ability at it. But the studies show there that if you go 45 minutes and then have 15 minutes of recovery or even rest, then you can come back up to that level you were at before, and you can sustain it for another 45 minutes or to an hour, and then you need 15 to 20 or 30 minutes of rest. And so that's where the 3-to-1 work to rest ratio comes into play. And what's fascinating, Lawrence, and it's kind of it's kind of a weird thing. Those that and I don't advocate smoking whatsoever, but those who are smokers and had the smoko break actually had the cycle right. They would work for 45 minutes to an hour. They'd go outside. They would talk to their friends that were also having a smoke for 15, 20 minutes. They would talk about something else. Their brain would recover, and then they'd come back and work again. So they actually had the cycle right, but there was obviously a negative piece in there as well.
Negative consequence. So just to be clear on this point, because I know a lot of people listening to this will relate to what you're saying, but some people who are focused on high performance may not understand what rest actually looks like. So we can kind of get the fact that we do 45 minutes and then we take our rest, but in that rest, we might end up doing other things that actually are not necessarily restful. And what would rest look like? Because that could mean different things to different people. Do we meditate? Do we just go outside for a walk? Do we just lay on the, I'd love you to be quite prescriptive about what a rest break should look like to allow people to sustain that performance.
Okay, really good. All right, so there's a difference between rest and recovery. So rest is when you actually rest the brain and rest the body. So that is sleeping, that you can maybe get close to it when you meditate, when you might be lying on the ground and listening to music. Okay, so that is more rest, where you are slowing down the brain and you're giving it time to really fully rest. Recovery can be quite proactive. For me, my recovery is to go out and ride for an hour. Now, a lot of people go, "Oh man, that's strenuous." Well, no, it's a recovery for the brain. Right. And there's obviously all the hormones and other things that happen when you go out and exercise and you get out in nature and you're outside and things like that. But recovery can also mean just changing the conversation, having a conversation with someone else that is not intense. So it's about how do you go from being really fried, deep thinking on something, to then how do I relax it? Now, that could be music. It could be having a conversation, as I said. Now, this is a bit more challenging now that people might be working from home. You don't have those water cooler moments, so to speak, where you'd go and get a cup of tea, or you go and get a water from the water cooler and you'd have a bit of a chat and kind of go into a bit of a recovery phase. It can be even just switching tasks and going to a lower kind of a cognitive function type task where, you might be just doing kind of basic data entry or whatever it may be, but you're not actually full on having to think about something. So it's just being able to change those around. For me, I like to get up. If I get a phone call, I like to go for a walk. So I'm kind of getting a bit of both at the same time. Or I just go and change location in the house to do something else. So it's just been able to change it. So they're probably more easy ways you can do it in a working environment, because a lot of people are like, what, I can't just stop work for 15 minutes. I can't just walk away. What can I do?
Yeah, and that's really, really helpful. But what we shouldn't be doing is sitting at our desk all day and not getting up, not changing our environment, not doing things. We can still work, but we've got to give our brain the opportunity to recover. That was really helpful. Let's just move on and talk about pressure, because I know this is an area that you have spent a lot of time, and I like this concept of atomic pressure and how you talk about leaning into pressure. Well, many people, that may sound very alien. It's like, why would we want to lean into pressure? want to lean away from pressure? So I'd love you to talk about pressure. For clearly, as a person, you've certainly lent in, and you've engaged with a lot of pressure, the work that you do, and the many balls that you juggle. So I'd love you to tell us what atomic pressure is and how we can benefit from leaning into pressure.
Yeah, very good. So pressure is something that we're generally taught to avoid or avert when we're younger. Like, is pressure there? All right, let's go away from it and let's go somewhere where there's less pressure. But that's actually not practical, because you're going to be avoiding something all the time. And you need to overcome pressure to grow and evolve, etc. as well. So we actually need to lean into pressure rather than avoid it. And so atomic pressure is looking around, okay, what is pressure and how we can use it? Now, if we look at atomic and atoms and kind of how they interact, is quite similar to how humans behave. So if we look at, and atoms are negatively and positively charged inside the molecule. Now, as human beings, we have negative energy and positive energy. Okay, so similar type concept. Yet we're not kind of structured the same, but it's a similar concept. But then you look at how, when we go into an atomic phase, so you have, you think about an atomic or nuclear reaction. So atomic bomb is a nuclear reaction that can happen in three ways. So you look at fusion, where you get two atoms come together and they fuse to become bigger and create more energy. Now, if you think about that in your own world, if you add add different moments of stress, whether that be physical stress, mental stress at work, you add on another stress of family stress or whatever it may be, they add up. So you start to grow bigger. So the energy involved in that pressure becomes bigger as they connect together. Then you've got fissure, where two atoms can either collide. So you think about when you've got competing stresses and you collide with something. So in a workforce, it might be two people who have different opinions, or who both have high stress loads, and they come together and what we call a head clash, or butting heads, or whatever it may be, that happens. Then you've got that other moment of fissure as well, where an atom will spontaneously combust, right? So something I talk about when I speak is, we've all, who's got a 3-year-old child, right? You're right, yeah. Okay, and if you haven't got a 3-year-old child, have you seen a 3-year-old in the supermarket who is all acting normally and then next minute they spontaneously combust? We've all had those moments. And so that is happening because inside of them, pressures, little stresses are adding up that we don't know about because they're not talking to us, and then they will just spontaneously combust. So that's where atomic pressure comes from, all right, in those aspects. When we actually look at what pressure is, so, for us, if you have the Yerkes-Dodson law is kind of an inverted U shape, and it talks about performance and pressure. And so it's been around for 100 years. So if you've got low pressure, you actually have low performance, because if you have low pressure, it doesn't mean much. You don't really care. So you're less likely, like there's no timeline or a deadline, so you're less likely to complete it. If you have high pressure, it's also low performance, because too much pressure, we get overwhelmed and it all seems too hard, or we make mistakes, so we actually go low performance. The sweet spot is in the middle. All right, and there's, where you sit along that top of that curve will depend on what your performance is, right? So some people have a bigger pressure space where they can perform at, some have a really narrow space. And it's just your ability to be able to adapt in those situations. So we need pressure in our life to be able to perform. If no pressure, you don't perform. Too much pressure,
you don't
right?
perform.
So it's a fine edge. You can see why athletes get it wrong sometimes. You can see why leaders, you go, oh, wow, they're performing so well. And then next day, they've gone over the top, right? They've just added one more thing to their plate. They have had something happen in the organization where they now have to, it's added another stress that's in their mind. They may have only had 2 to 3 hours sleep. The body now goes into a performance decline. So in those spaces. So atomic pressure, we talk about the 5 principles of atomic pressure. So one being release the pressure valve. So what is that trigger for you to know when pressure is building, so you can sense pressure building, to just go release valve? Okay, so that could be, it could be going for a walk, could be going for a ride, it could be listening to music. Okay, what is something you can do that will release the pressure valve for you? So knowing what that is, so when you feel it building, feel the stress come up, the heart might be, you might have too much cortisol in the body and the hearts, you can feel the heart a bit tired. What is that pressure valve you need to release? The second one is the turn the pressure tap. So knowing when to turn the pressure up and how to turn it off. So what is your kind of pressure tap? So you can feel it coming up. All right, I just need to adjust it a little bit. Excellent, cool, now I can hold it. Now you can do this with your team as well, for instance. If you've got employees or you've got team members that you're working with, if you know that, all right, I need to tighten the deadline here so I can increase the pressure so we perform better, or you might need to go, all right, I need to I need to release some tasks from that person so they can release the pressure tap as well, right? So that's there. Then there's create a pressure shield. So when there's lots of things happening in the world, lots of stresses, lots of things coming towards you and happening, how do you create a pressure shield around you so you can hold it off? Now, I suppose it's a good time to tell people pressure is only an internal thing. It's not an external thing. Yes, there are forces, yes, there are things out there, but you get to determine whether it's pressure or not. It's purely a mental thing. And it all comes down to how important it is, how urgent it is, and what is the volume of it. So it's importance, urgency, and then volume. So that's how pressure works. All right. So pressure shield is around having an affirmation, like a 3-word kind of metaphor or 3-word mantra. Actually, a 3-word mantra. There we go. That you say that can actually create that pressure shield. Now, for me, when I was racing, it was free your mind. And that was it. Free your mind. Would just imagine. So, because, when you're doing Ironman, you're racing anywhere between 8 and 17 hours. And a lot of time out there, a lot of thoughts that could really tire you out. And so you have to consume the smallest amount of information to allow you to perform and let the rest go. So it's around, knowing stuff is coming in, but knowing what to keep and what to let go in that moment. So you can't sweat the small stuff. And so, but finding a 3-word mantra is really helpful. We remember well in threes, or either 3 words or 3 syllables, because generally it has a little bit of rhythm to it. It's just easy for us to remember. So, it could be like Nike, just do it. It could be it or whatever. Sure. But think about what can do there. The next one is enable the pressure magnet. So at certain times you need to increase the adrenaline so you can get something across the line quickly. So you can do that by tightening the deadline. You can do that by increasing the importance. So tightening the deadlines, increasing urgency, tightening the importance or the reason why I want to do this, why this is so important, will increase importance. So that will increase pressure enough to get things done. And so that pressure magnet. So for instance, I would use this in the last 1 kilometer of a race. So, talking about creating a pressure shield, I'd have sometimes 10,000, 20,000 people cheering you on at these races, and you needed to block that out so you could focus on the race. But at a certain time, you needed to use that crowd to increase your adrenaline. But I knew you've only got 3 to 5 minutes at maximum capacity. Otherwise, then it's gone. Then you go flat. So I would kick it in with with 1K to go. And that was kind of a secret weapon that I would use quite often. I knew that if I could let the crowd in, bang, that was when I could go. And I had 1K to do it, and it was around 3 minutes.
I love that.
And that was it. So that's that one. And then the last one is 5, lean into pressure. And, we talked about that before, the importance of realizing that you've got to grasp pressure and take control of it. The All Blacks, for instance, the famous rugby team that has the best winning percentage of any professional and international sport over 100 years is, they use walk towards pressure. And they started that about 18 years ago. And so that's one of their mantras, is walk towards pressure. So the importance of taking control.
I love that. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think everybody relates to that and can benefit from those 5 things for sure. I've certainly got a different picture of pressure. We're almost out of time, but just to segue into, I guess, one big pressure for many of us is communicating our ideas, communicating our concepts, trying to pitch to the board. And I know you've done a lot of work around helping people to enhance their communication skills. I would argue that communication is the #1 skill that we all need, because we have to share our ideas. We have to be able to engage with other people if we're going to have impact. So I'd love you to bring us a little bit up to speed now with the work that you're doing with Speakers Institute Corporate and the work you do to help people develop those skills. Because in my experience as a corporate leader, it was one of the most pressurized things for people, developing products, doing all of those things, but actually coming to the point of pitching. That's when people felt very challenged and hugely stressful, particularly when you're pitching or when you're trying to influence board level people who are not the most patient of people, let's face it. So any tips or any thoughts that you have on that would be very appreciated.
Yeah, it's all, we all have these great well-being solutions and strategies and innovations, and they're all great, but unless you can actually get it across the line and have it a part of strategy or a part of the day-to-day operations of a business, they're just about useless, right? They're just sitting there. They're just a great idea. And so I think it's really important to understand how you can influence, because when you look at, C-suite, for instance, they've got a lot of pressures on their mind, and they've got things like profitability are really, really important. You've got things like how is that going to increase their marketability, or how is that seen? How does it affect people in the business? How does it build those kind of key core principles that C-suite need to kind of do to be high performing? And so well-being is kind of the tricky one, because it's not very concrete. It's not like, all right, we implement this well-being strategy, we know we'll get X amount of growth in profitability or whatever it may be. You don't get that. So it's important that you're able to influence them, to show them how those well-being strategies will then help support the 5 kind of key aspects of the performance things that they are monitored on and measured on as C-suite. I think what else is really important is understanding how the psychology of that C-suite. They generally don't have much time. So you've got to be able to get your point across clearly and articulate it well. So you need clarity first around your message, which is really, really important. and then be able to deliver it in a way that can influence them. They like to be a lot more high level, so big picture, not detail, right? That's why you're there working for them. You're the person who does the detail. So you've got to be able to provide them with the high level, but also showcase you have the detail there if they want to look at it further. So a high level to detail. Obviously, they would need to be able to trust you. You know, people like doing things with people they like. So you've got to build that relationship first and connect with them, and then become a trusted advisor. So you need to be able to showcase, one, that you can connect with them, but two, that they can see that you've done the work, that you can actually give them advice that's actually going to help support the vision of the company that they're trying to achieve. You know, that can help support them get more productivity or whatever it may be. So you've got to tie the in to become that trusted advisor. You have to tie it into what is the needs of the C-suite. Then it all comes down to how you actually present, right? So how are you going to present this to the person? We all have great solutions, but solutions are absolutely pointless and useless unless people know what the problem is you're solving. So you've got to identify what the problem is first. So what is the problem? And you've got to clearly articulate that to the C-suite or the board level you're talking to. So, and the clearer you can describe that problem, the easier it will be to influence them. And you've got to do it in a way that makes them feel it, right? So get there, what's the problem they're facing, and get them to feel a situation in that, with that problem. So if it's to do with, you know, the frustration and the tiredness of being on Zoom 8 hours a day, and you've got a solution for that, how the company can still function and be have productivity, they're going to lean in and listen, because they're sick of being on Zoom 8 hours a day as well, right? Like no one enjoys being on it all that time. So it's been able to, you know, position a problem, then follow up with your solution. Now, once you've got a solution, people then want to be able to connect on a human level. So give them an insight into a human example of how this can help the company. Maybe it's something you've seen before inside the company that you can go, okay, see how that happened? We can create this. And then you give them a visual inside their brain so they can go, I can see that. They can imagine it. So if they can't see it, they're not likely to buy into it. So how can you paint a picture in their mind? And then keep it really simple for them. Tell them what you want them to do next. Do you want them to read the rest of your document? Do you want them to make a decision? Do you want them to position this to the board? What is it? Give them the next step and make it really clear. Because as we said, they don't have much time, and they trust you to give you the information. They wouldn't have given you the meeting in the first place. So make sure you maximize that and then take control. All right, I'd like you now to be able to recommend this to the board, or I'd like you to sign this document. Be really clear.
Sounds easy, masterful. It sounds really easy. Thank you so much, Craig. Like we're almost out of time, so yeah, let me finish up by just acknowledging you for like the amazing work you've done, and the lives and the many lives that you've impacted. Thank you for spending some of your day with us today to share such valuable tips. It's incredible. I know you're super busy, so I do really appreciate you making time in your calendar. Where can people find out more about you and about the leadership coaching work that you do, and about Speakers Institute corporate? What are the places where people can find you?
Thanks very much. So speakersinstitutecorporate.com. So you can go there and find out about how we inspire great leaders through solving ineffective communication and decision-making in leadership and workplaces. So you can find that on the website. You can go to craigjohns.com.au, and that's where I do kind of my keynote speaking, and you can see some of the other work that I do in this leadership performance space. And then you can always find me on LinkedIn. So yeah, feel free to connect and have a conversation.
Sounds wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Craig, and thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye now.